Welcome, guys and gals, to Show Us, Don't Tell Us, here live on the L&M Radio Network. And if you guys get a chance, please donate. It's a $5 donation, and you will have access to a boatload of archives, man. Well, talk about an encyclopedia of information. It's unbelievable. You thought the library was good back in the day. This is unbelievable. And not only that, you're not going to find this type of information in the library. Anyways, everybody, welcome to the show. Unfortunately, we're missing one of our co-hosts, Michael Bejas. He has similar conditions that I have, and he's not going to be on tonight. I'm working on my 21st day of this. Only came to a head Sunday night, and ear infection, sinus infection, bronchitis. So I'm kind of duking that out at the moment. And but anyways, I want to touch base before I go any further in regards to the OSU stabbings, not shootings. I mean, this guy had driven his car into one of the labs and jumped out and stabbed numerous amounts of people. I believe it was up to 11. The last I had heard is that nothing was life-threatening from what I understand. Thank God, even though it's a major inconvenience for all these people, the campus, all the families and that, and hopefully they get through this in a positive fashion and we move along. But moving right along, I just thought I'd mention that. I'm going to hand this. We have a very special guest tonight, and I'm going to let Papa Bear take care of that. So I'm going to hand it off to Papa Bear, and it's all you, man.
Hey, boy, you sound like you've been run through the ringer.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Well, anyway, thanks for coming in and hanging in here. You were listening to Show Us, Don't Tell Us on the L&M Radio Network. I am Papa Bear. Tonight we've got Peter Kling. Many of you are familiar with who Peter Kling is, but Peter Kling is a Bible scholar, but he looks into the other end of it, if you will. He's not a religious man, he's a spiritual man. But anyway, Peter, how are you?
Very good, Barry. Very good. Glad to be here and glad to be part of your show and bring some enlightenment to your audience.
I'll tell you, I'm glad to have you in here. I didn't do you any justice, actually, with the introduction, but people pretty much know what's going on. You wrote a book. You wrote 2 books, right? Letters to Earth.
I wrote Letters to Earth, and I'm working on the next one. I really don't have a working title for it yet, but it's. Well, I guess maybe that's a good place to start. We've always had that age-old question. I kind of answered that in Letters to Earth a little bit about where we came from, what we're doing here, how things got to this extent, and what's our future. And especially, what our future is. We're all interested in our future. We know our past pretty well, and a lot of us try to relive it over and over again. But our future is something that just seems really uncertain, especially in these times. I mean, you mentioned the stabbings at Kent State earlier, and just the different protests that we've seen since the election and the division that the country is in. And it seems to be divided in an odd way. If we look at the Trump supporters, it seems like all the Christians came out and supported Trump, and those who were supporting Hillary don't have any clue about anything except, their liberal agenda, which is not a very good agenda.
And you mentioned that people know a lot about their history. Actually, I'm finding that a lot of people don't know a lot about the history, especially when you go back to the Nephilim. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, what I found, Barry, this last generation, the millennials, don't have a clue. I mean, not just about life, but, seriously, just don't have a clue about where we are in the stream of time. When we look at the candidate that the Democratic Party ran for president, you're looking at one of the most awful people on the face of the planet that's got a reputation that nobody would want.
Oh, yeah.
So have around and run her for president.
Right. See, well, my point was, no one, none of the children or young people are educated, even my age and your age, not educated about the giants that used to inhabit this earth and what we've actually found for skeletal remains, and it's not over yet.
We've got a long ways to go, and they haven't left.
Exactly.
That's part of looking at this from a slightly different viewpoint. I started my research. Well, I've had a very unusual life, but I started my research in trying to bring both ends of my life together back around 1980, 1981. And I thought that if we were the generation that was supposed to see this Armageddon, then there would be plenty of scientific proof within the scriptures themselves that would aid that.
There is.
And so, there is. Being a scientist, I started looking at the Bible from a totally different direction. And the more I looked, the more evidence that there was. One of my favorite verses, right in Genesis, is the creation of woman.
Yeah.
Where it says that God said it wasn't good for the man to be alone, so he caused a sleep to come over the man. He opened the flesh, he removed a rib, he clothed.
Basically, cloning, yeah.
And Adam knew it. He said, "This is flesh of my flesh and blood of my blood."
Right.
Now, here's the wild part, Barry. The technology and the science that we needed to start to decode the scripture or scriptures didn't exist until the year that I was conceived. Mm-hmm. It was 1955 is when they discovered DNA, or exactly what DNA was.
Right.
And since then, we've learned that we can genetically engineer almost anything. They've unwrapped the human genome, that they know exactly what belongs where and how to manipulate it, in all different ways.
Okay. Now, everybody has a genetic code and a DNA code, right?
Well, the genetic code that we have is
right.
Vice versa.
Right, but you've got a DNA code also. Okay.
Yes.
And your DNA code, if you start looking at this in computer terminology, quantum computing, if you will, your DNA is the source code for your program.
Yes, essentially.
And we can change our DNA depending on our environment. And if you change the source code, you can't modify the program.
But if you modify the program. See, we actually can change our DNA by what we focus on.
Right. Right.
We're not going to transform ourselves, from the genetic code that we have into some other genetic code and look totally different.
What I'm saying is like Tesla said with the ether. The ether is there, okay? Could you imagine the ether being like a world wide web of sorts, and all the access to every source code is accessible through that web? Okay? And those that have those programs, if you will, that still retain their source code, can be modified, and the ones that have changed their source code can't. You see what I'm getting at?
I'm not exactly quite sure here.
Well, I mean, if there's an invisible force that connects us all, which is the ether, right? And if that force is basically like an attachment, and you can access all of your beings, if you will, through that force, then it's possible to modify them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like quantum computing is what I'm saying.
And I do get that. I do get that. That's one of the things that I'll be explaining in the new book a little bit more. It's how we are all connected. not just to each other, but to everything.
Right.
It goes by a very simple law, the law of physics. One of the primary laws of physics is that you can neither create nor destroy energy.
Mm-hmm.
And now
Right.
we know through the workings of the Hadron Collider at CERN. A couple of years ago, they found the God particle, which really is that little piece of energy that keeps all matter matter.
Right.
This brings us into string
Oh.
theory and superstring theory. But string theory basically says that all energy is made up of vibrating strings, either circular
Right.
strings or a linear string.
Yeah.
Kind of like a guitar or a rubber band. When you pluck it, it plays a particular note. Well, those strings are on the sub-atomic level.
Yeah.
In other words, you have to go down to the atomic level. And to give you an idea of what we're dealing with, once you're at the atomic level, you're dealing with one part solid with
Right.
4 billion parts of empty space
Right.
at the atomic level. So you're going so small. It's like if a pea was an atom, the orbit of that atom would be like the whole entire solar system.
Oh. Okay.
Crazy. But anyway, or would take the space of the whole entire solar system. Then we could go into that atom to start taking it apart to find the string. Gets a little confusing, a little complicated, but basically everything it vibrates to a specific tune, essentially, or to a specific vibration.
Right.
And
Right. Frequency.
once you change that vibration, you change what that item is. So if you took water, H2O, if you change the atomic vibration of water, that string vibration, it wouldn't be water anymore. It would become something else, depending
Right.
on how you reset that vibration.
Right.
Now,
Which is
when we go,
essentially boiling or freezing.
well, that's changing the state of water from a liquid, well, solid to a liquid gas. But I'm actually talking about changing water from, let's say, or H2O, let's say, from water to something like gold.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay. That would
Well,
that's a
we
serious
could.
change of vibration there.
Well, yeah. See, anything can be extracted if it's in there, provided you use the right chemical.
But you see, we're just talking about the very vibration of
Right.
energy itself.
Right.
So this would be the vibration on a subatomic level at such a tiny part that they needed the Hadron Collider to break the atomic pieces apart from each other and get into the inside of what was there in order to find the God particle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're dealing with
Right.
something that at our scale is so minute, but
Right.
when we flip it over, it's the building block for everything that exists, not only in the third dimension, but through all 10 dimensions, because we don't live in just a 3D
Right.
world. According to string theory, we live in a 10-dimensional world, of which the physical dimensions are the largest. Now, the interesting thing about string theory is that we are not dimensions 1, 2, and 3. We are dimensions 8, 9, and 10. Dimensions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5, 6, and 7 came before, mathematically, came before the physical dimensions that we live in, and we live in those dimensions of 8, 9, and 10. The 11th dimension is actually time, which is a variable across all the
Right. Okay.
dimensions.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um,
So
I wanted to.
now, go ahead.
Well, it's been bugging me for a little bit. I aroused my curiosity. You had quite the experience in the past, right?
A lot of them.
Well, I mean, you've met with other other beings of sorts and basically instructed and I'm not sure what that's all about, but you touched on it and it's always intrigued me and I've never attempted to ask you about it.
Well,
So I'm
I've had
asking you about it now.
I've had a very strange life, Barry. You
Okay.
know, even my birth date. We go back to my birth date, and this is where kind of and all these things I found out later on in life, especially the one thing which I will mention here in just a minute. But my birth date, when you decode it into the Illuminati numerology,
Uh-huh.
my birth date and time transpose as 4 11 11 11 4. So I've
Okay.
actually got that number 11 is their slight super number. I don't know a whole lot about numerology. I'm not an expert in it.
Right. Okay.
I'm an expert in hermeneutics of the Bible and understanding the prophecies uh, through science, not through religious dogma or dictate, but using science to understand what's actually going on so we can figure out who we are and where we're headed. Um, but that's where it starts off strange and just gets even more strange. But at about the age of 4.5, I guess, I wasn't 5 yet, and it was in the fall of the year, as I recall. A very interesting thing happened. People started studying the Bible with me, and I wasn't quite sure why, but I was being taught scripture and prophecy as a young child, and this wasn't primarily through my parents, but they agreed to it. And I was being taught by people who were not religious people. As a matter of fact, the two things that I was instructed from a very early age was never to get involved in religion and never get involved in earth politics.
Right.
Religion was a scam, and earth politics was part of a falsehood. So,
Okay.
when you grow up with this in the back of your mind, you're separated. But it was more than just that. The reason for the politics was because these people who were teaching me the scriptures, their kingdom was not part of this world.
All right.
So now you have to wait a minute. Where did I hear that before? My kingdom is not of this world. For if it was of this world, my attendants would have thought that I would not be delivered up to the Jews.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't our Lord say that?
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, buddy.
the interesting thing is that I went through, I was learning the scriptures and from a very early age, so everything was very, very real to me. When you're a kid, the great thing about children is that they are in the state of alpha. Their brains operate
Right.
in a state where they're just much more in tune to the world around them.
Right.
And it's after we go through puberty that we actually get our adult beta operating system, which allows us to operate in this crazy world that we exist in. And that beta operating system is where the fight or flight response is.
Okay.
Now, once we remove ourselves from that fight or flight response system, we go into alpha, and alpha is where we do all our planning. It's where we, daydream about the future. It's where we turn fantasy into reality.
All right,
Right.
all right. So,
And
Peter, let me ask you, how does that dissipate that natural flight and fight response? My question.
here's the interesting thing. When we are in a state of love, that automatically puts us in a state of alpha. When we pray, that
Okay.
puts us in a state of alpha.
Okay.
And so, people who, are desperate, they say that there's no atheists in foxholes, right? Well, if you got bullets running over your head and you go into a prayer, that takes you out of that fight or flight syndrome and puts you in a state of alpha. It removes you from the circumstance in which you are in, even for a brief moment,
Okay.
and allows you now to operate at a different level. So it's not just that instant response. You've got to respond to something instantly, but it allows us to plan our next move successfully.
Right. That's okay. All right.
So that's the difference. When we pray, we go into alpha. It removes us from that fear system. And that's actually a key part of who we are. I don't
So,
want
in other words, it removes the frantics and allows you to think in a proper fashion,
yeah,
rather than taking
you
you
know,
off balance. Right.
correct. Yeah, and you see, once we pull out of that, once we get into that alpha level, we find we don't have to fight. You see, we become more in tune to the world around us. We become more in tune to the cosmos. Now we can go to the next level down, which is theta. And I promise you, anybody that's in theta ain't doing much more than sitting still. Because at theta, our brains are vibrating from 8 to 4 cycles per second. That's a sleep state.
Right.
You have to be not mobile. You have to be sitting still and in deep meditation to bring yourself down into theta. Now, the interesting thing about the theta vibration of the brain is that once we hit 7 cycles per second, the hippocampus engages and the right hemisphere opens up, and we can literally communicate with every other brain that's vibrating at 7 hertz or less. So if it's vibrating at 7 cycles per second or less, we can read each other's thoughts instantly.
It's just about
We know,
everyone.
and we can, and this happens with everybody. So it can literally happen with what, roughly, how many billion people do we have on the earth? 7 billion,
yeah.
8
Well,
billion,
yeah.
heading for 8 now.
Well, here's the question. I mean, if you can fall into that alpha state, I mean, is it immediately the individuals that you're surrounded by? If you can also collectively bring them into that state, or does it just vibrate like harmonically to whatever extent? I don't know.
Oh, alpha is more of a transition state. Alpha in alpha, we do our planning. I'll give you a good example. Everybody can play along here. This is a great little game. If you're listening to the radio right now, just kind of close your eyes and think of the last time you went on vacation, whatever it was. Maybe it was a cruise ship. Maybe you went to the island somewhere. But think about the last time you went on vacation. What did you like about it the most? Think about it. Did you go on a cruise ship? If you did, can you feel the breeze? Can you smell the food? Can you hear the bands playing? You see, if you can start to do that, you're an alpha.
You know what it is? I mean, looking back at it, Peter, how ironic you should bring that up is looking back at my honeymoon in '88 when the wife and I went out to the Bahamas back then. We just got away from everything. You know, it just puts you in another state of mind. You eliminated a lot of the normal everyday confusion. It's like you just put it behind you. You're on a sabbatical is pretty much the bottom line, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I just got back from 5 months off the grid, or living off the grid. We're building a home up in Maine, and we're making it out of stone because we're so far back. They're never going to get a fire engine back in there. So if we ever do have a fire, at least it won't burn down completely. We'd lose the roof off it, and that's about it. Shovel it out and start over again. But the interesting thing is, off the grid, we barely have cell phone service there, so it's not like we're being bombarded with microwaves. We don't have the electric impulses. There's no electricity. The closest electricity is like 2 miles away. And you're there with nature. And even though we're working, what I found now for the last 10 years, 15, well, most of my life, most of my adult life, I've not had a manual labor job. I was a chemist for the first 8 years, 10 years actually, and then I wound up going into communication, sales, and marketing. And that seemed to agree with me quite a bit. But after I left the force, I had something that basically retired me. Another test of life in a head-on collision. But even after that, I wasn't very active. as far as being physical. However, being up on the side of the mountain there, living in and with nature, in that 5 months, my whole complete body was transformed essentially back to, now I'm 60 years old, and I was doing the work that I was doing when I was 17. My body looks like it's 17 years old. Well, minus the scars, but
Yeah.
it's not like I've got about 5% body fat, and I have to contribute all of that to the physical work, but also being an alpha as much as I was, and being up in an environment with nature. I found myself spending a tremendous amount of time in prayer. And one of the things that I would pray for was power beyond what was normal so that I could complete my task. Now, one of the last things that we did, what stopped us from continuing our task there, was a change in the weather. We're using concrete, and you can only use concrete above 40 degrees, and we had just had 2 tons of concrete delivered in bags, had to be mixed up. And the weather turned on us. And it
Oh.
and was that for 10 days. Well, all of a sudden the weather broke. And we said, hey, we got a good sunny day, and it's going to be another warm day tomorrow. We can get the rest of this concrete into the ground. 2 tons of concrete was delivered. That had to be, I personally lifted that load 3 times. That's 6 tons. Plus, I carried part of it across my son carried the other part. I figured between the two of us, that load was lifted about 5 times by the time it got into the wall. But I personally lifted it 3 times. I lifted over 6 tons of concrete. Not all the same,
Right.
but throughout the day. For a 60-year-old man, that ain't too bad.
No.
Yeah, right. Well, hey, Peter, let me ask you something real quick. Now, in regards to now, when you're currently working on the building and that, have you noticed that when you're busy, you could absorb more in regards to when you're multitasking? And okay, your vision's already, it's busy, but in regards to anything you hear or anything outside of your vision, where while you're just so busy, you just you absorb more things and that you haven't thought about.
Oh yeah. That's one of the strange things about doing. I'll call it physical mindless labor, because that's a lot of what it was. We had to put in a road that was almost 700 feet long before we got to the build site where we were actually building. That had to be cleared too, through some of the most dense forest in Maine that I've ever walked through. So it doesn't take a whole lot of intelligence to cut a branch off of a tree and move it to a pile. It just doesn't. So you've got all this mental time to observe things, and with that mental time, you tend to go into alpha a lot, which is where you are when you pray or meditate. And so when there's a lot of that spiritual connection that's going on there, where when we are living on the grid, number one, we're being bombarded with electronic signals from every different direction.
Yeah.
And so you're essentially living almost in a toaster, because you've got the electric wires in your house, you got the Wi-Fi going, you've got 2 or 3 cell towers within range that are shooting you with a frequency that's just below microwave. Yeah. Plus, if there's any other Wi-Fi connections in your area, so we're bombarded with all of this signal.
Yeah, leakage from the smart meters.
Yep, smart meters on the side of your house. Yeah, throw that one in. Oh, yeah. So we're being constantly bombarded with these signals, which some are close to microwave, and none of them are any good for us. And it puts everyone in this world of being programmed. You come home, you sit down at the end of the day for your long day in front of a TV, and you get more programmed from the TV. As a matter of fact, there's a patent that was issued back around 2000, 2001, and it was a patent to physically control people using monitors,
Right.
TV monitors, computer monitors, smartphone monitors, iPhone monitors, and it's all by sending an algorithmic message through the screen where they can actually control our physiology. And so we've got so much going on that is attacking us, and it's all designed to push us where? Out of that beta area where we can plan our futures and calculate from, into an area of reaction, into that beta fight or flight. And when we look at what has happened to our civilization over the last, I don't even have to go my lifetime, it's funny. I think of my grandparents, my day. Well, I'm a grandparent now, but over the last 25 to 30 years, we have really seen a decline in who we are as a country.
Oh, yeah.
Who Americans
No
are.
kidding.
Well, Peter, let me ask you a question. Why is it that this beta version is like a default? Why are we defaulted to that if that is indeed the case?
Well, we can answer that using scripture. That is a very interesting question, because see, when we go back to Genesis, what I quoted before, Genesis 2nd chapter, 21st to the 23rd verse, where Eve is created, it goes on to say, and they were naked, and it's stating that both man and woman were naked, and they were good with it. They didn't have any issues. When we go into chapter 3, where the serpent appears and he convinces Eve that it's good that she eats this fruit, and if she does, she'll be just like God, knowing the difference between good and evil. Well, something I always wonder, and I wonder if it had a virus in it. Kind of a very common virus, herpes simplex 1 or herpes simplex 2. The evil thing about that virus is that it attaches itself to our DNA. So if you should ever get it, you're going to have it for life because it attaches to your DNA. Well, that made me think about this fruit, because God said in the very day of your eating it, you will die. Now, they didn't die within 24 hours. But I had an interesting conversation with a genetic engineer. Strange circumstances. This gal had just gotten her master's degree in biochemistry and genetic engineering, and we had met in Amsterdam, of all places. And I asked her the question. I said, because right now our DNA has telomeres, what are called telomeres on the end. And when our DNA replicates, we lose a set of telomeres. And so I posed the question to her. I said, is there any way of knowing if our DNA was ever attacked? I gave her the hyperbole of, could this fruit have had a virus which attached itself to our DNA somehow and short-circuited it? And she thought about it and thought about it. She said, no, there would be no way to tell. Now, about 2 years ago, I saw a very interesting little video that was done, which showed our DNA with the double helix connected at the ends, and it looked like an infinity sign. You know how the infinity sign goes, like kind of like a figure 8? Yeah, so the DNA had no beginning and no end.
Right.
It was a loop. And if it was a loop, it wouldn't need telomeres now, would it?
Right.
See, when we run out of telomeres, we die.
Okay.
But if it was a loop, there wouldn't be a need for telomeres. So could that virus in the fruit had cut our DNA and attached telomeres? You see, we don't know.
Right.
We don't know. But here's the thing. When we go back and we look at the event, it says God called them, and it became the breezy part of the day, and God called Adam, and when they heard God's voice, they became frightened and hid themselves.
Right.
Fright is a beta syndrome.
Right.
Now, also, after they ate the fruit, they realized they were naked and they covered themselves.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. That's why I was asking about the beta scenario, man. That's
Yeah,
a default.
yeah. And so after our DNA became defective, the beta system became a part of a way of life. We had no choice. We were given the beta system. And so you know how the computer companies or any companies, they're
Right.
going to send something out on a test. It's a beta test.
Yeah.
Guess what? Earth is being beta tested. That's the truth. Earth is being beta tested. If we didn't have the beta response system, there would be no killing. There would be no murder.
Right.
There'd be no thievery. There'd be no arson. There wouldn't be any protests the way that we see them. Everybody would care for everybody else because we wouldn't have that. We would be in a state of alpha. What do we find in alpha? We're in love with alpha.
Right.
Yeah. We
Right.
experience love in alpha. So if you could never get into the beta system, into that beta state of mind, where you were getting ready to fight somebody or run away from a fight,
Yeah.
there wouldn't be any fighting, would there?
Well, Peter, let me ask you a question. I mean, is there a way? I mean, do you have to spontaneously, depending on a situation, put yourself premeditatedly put yourself in an alpha as opposed to, is there a way where you could just maintain that on a continuous and regular basis to override the so-called default beta? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, we've got to be in beta to carry on our day-to-day life to some extent. But yes, you can be in alpha, and we go into alpha throughout the day several times. I mean, if you're working on a project, or if you're sitting down and doing the bills, trying to balance your checkbook, I bet you're going to be in alpha. Even
Well,
though,
then all of a sudden it's like, okay, man, I have something to tackle, so I'm going to go into alpha, and all of a sudden, okay, that's done. So then you default right back into beta.
well, you don't have to default back into beta. But let's say you're driving to work, and if you're driving in traffic, God, I hope you're in beta, because if you're in alpha, there's going to be an accident.
Yeah.
Right. You're done like a dinner.
It's
Yeah.
gonna be a
Yeah,
hazard. Yeah.
But if you're walking through the woods, you could be in alpha all the time because there's nothing that you have to respond to in an instant.
Right.
And it's that beta response system that allows us, not to have, not to run into the guy who just cut us off. We may curse him out and be in beta and be all upset and want to beat his brains in for what he just did. It's part of road rage anymore. But if we weren't in beta, we would have just had an accident.
Right. Well, here's another question. It's kind of stems from my tangential question earlier, if you can classify it as that. But excuse me. But let's say you're walking through the woods and you're with two other people, all right, and you choose to successfully go into this alpha sense. I mean, can that I'm not going to say it's not so much a harmonic, because a harmonic's like a doubling of frequency. But I mean, can that transcend into the people and that you're surrounded by?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. What I mean, I'm talking about whether or not do they have to be receptors, or all of a sudden they feel this. You know what I mean?
Well, they're going to feel it anyway. Chances, unless you're on a mission hunting something down, or hunting somebody down, chances are, if you're in a relaxing atmosphere, you're going to be in alpha. There's no reason to be in beta. You're relaxing. You're observing what's around you. There's nothing really to react to per se. However, if you're in a kayak going down a whitewater rapid, you may want to be in beta because you're going to have to react to a lot of things happening all at once. So there are times that we need to be into beta, is what I'm saying. However, we enjoy being in alpha. That's why we go on vacation. What do you do when you go on vacation? Oh, I go to the beach. I like to lay down, and absorb up. Well, you're not doing anything. You're relaxing. You're an alpha.
Well, here's the thing. At what point in time, during a given situation, do you fall out of that default beta and in an alpha? In other words, where's the borderline? Where's the breaking line in regards to that?
It's being aware. Here's a good rule of thumb if you want to use this. The greatest commandment is that, as Jesus put it, you must love Yahweh your God with your whole heart, soul, and mind. He broke it into three categories: heart, soul, and mind. We'll come back to that. And it goes on. It says, and like it, you must love your neighbor as you do yourself. Both of A and B of the greatest commandment, loving God and loving your neighbor, start with love. That automatically puts you into alpha. So let's say you're in a beta situation, and we'll go back to no atheists and foxholes. You're in a beta situation. Once you start to pray, it automatically brings you into alpha. It automatically it's almost like turning a key and opening another door within your own consciousness. And indeed, that's really what it is. So we can tap into that alpha state at any time, whether it's through prayer or through meditation, whatever the requirement is. Now,
right, but you have to make a conscious effort.
Excuse me?
You have to make a conscious effort.
Oh, yes. Well, that's what it is. You see,
right.
It comes down to our consciousness. And boy, Barry, what a great segue. Let's go back to the fact that we live in a 10-dimensional multiverse. We live in the physical 3 dimensions. Well, our bodies are in the physical 3 dimensions.
Right.
But it is our conscious energy, our own consciousness, which can transcend all dimensions. And it does it within an instant. See, we believe, taught, that we are physical beings and there's nothing spiritual about us, and we evolve from lower life forms, and we get all this backstory that academia has invented over the last 100 years. And I say yes, that they invented over the last 100 years because they used the theory of evolution.
Right.
Theory of evolution.
Theory, right.
Yes. And people are out there saying, well, of course we evolved. God didn't create us all in 6 days or 7 days.
It's a theory. It still has yet to be proven. It cannot be proven.
You know what makes a lot more sense than we evolved? Genetic engineering.
Yeah.
That makes it, because you could take one human cell, one complete strand of DNA, and recreate all life on Earth.
Right. Yeah.
And it starts off with cyanobacteria. It's just adding more genetic information into that cellular structure.
Right.
And so, that's why you got all these different missing links, is because the DNA changed. Now,
right.
Earth changed too. We're kind of taught that Earth is a static thing. What I mean by static is that it's always been the same size and mass now that it's always been. Wrong. Earth is more massive now than it's ever been in its existence. And we can actually calculate the mass by, approximately 100 million metric tons of debris, space debris, enter Earth's atmosphere every year. Scientists calculate somewhere actually between 50 and 300. So you can calculate, add that in to every year, and go back 200 million years when the dinosaurs reigned. Well, if you subtract 100 million metric tons out of Earth's mass and go back to when the dinosaurs reigned, no wonder they were so big, because there's a lot less gravity on this planet.
Yeah.
It wasn't near as massive as what it is now. And as it continues to grow in mass, people, because the Earth will be more massive, people will become shorter. That's
Yeah.
just a matter of physics, because that's what happens to the vessel. The more
Right.
massive Earth becomes, the smaller things will exist more easily.
Right.
So the larger animals would either die off, or they would have to. What you would see is that the shorter, more stockier animals would be the ones that would survive better
Huh.
as the mass of Earth grew. That's why there's no
Right.
more dinosaurs left. They couldn't pump the blood up that high
Yeah.
with the masses. One of the reasons that they're not around. There's other reasons, but they just couldn't exist with the mass that they would carry and the mass that Earth is now. They
Right.
couldn't move. It'd be too big.
Right.
So Earth is not static. It's in constant flux. We never stay in the same place in the universe twice. We're constant. We're on this ride through space, which really isn't a vacuum. We're finding out that there's a lot more material out there than we ever knew. But we're riding through this plasma energy on Earth that we have where we're going, where we're headed,
Spaceball.
and yeah, pretty much, pretty much. And so that's been my whole job here since 1980s to figure all this out. And as I said, I've had a very unusual life. I was taught the scriptures by people who didn't want anything to do with religion. Interesting. But not just that, at the age of 18, I also had alien contact, which
Right.
that went on for about 5 days. Oh, actually, it was 5 different contacts over the course of 10 days. And that ended quite badly, because at the end of it all, they wanted me dead. And
Right.
I
Yeah,
wouldn't.
that's what I was going to ask you about, because I remember you touching on that, and I never heard anything in depth about that. I mean, little bits and pieces I got, and that kind of intrigued me.
Well, this was shortly. I became interested in aliens and UFOs. This is 1974. That it actually happened was the end of May, beginning of June, when I actually had contact. But I was curious. I was curious on what these entities were, and I was reading everything that I could find about it. Eric von Daniken had just published his book *Chariot of the Gods* about a year or two earlier, or whenever he published it. But it was popular during that time, and I couldn't quite wrap my brain around this, because it was falling outside of what I was taught. And what I was taught was that we were dealing with interdimensionals. Interdimensionals had no need for spacecraft.
Yeah.
They just didn't. And so what were these aliens now all about? And so I was open to it, and I was curious about it, and I spoke a lot about it, and I guess maybe I just brought it upon myself, if you want to call it that, because through my teens, I have to step back. At the age of 9, I had my first clairvoyant, if you want to call it, or the first time that I was able to see into the future, and that's what changed my life. I had a dream where I actually saw into the future, and then lived through that future event. And when I did, as a 9-year-old boy, it terrified me. And I ran home, and I told my mom. I remember this to this day like it was yesterday. Come running up the stairs and into the house. Is, Ma, I just had a dream that came true. And she was washing dishes, and she said, "Oh, that's nice, honey. It's time for you to go to bed." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah, that's the way it always works. They don't listen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But that's
Unreal. Peter's pixelating there.
different. Samuel was given to the temple at the age of 5 as a servant, and he served the high priest, and he started actually becoming a prophet at the age of 8.
Yeah.
And so I knew this. I knew the story, but I didn't have. Now all of a sudden the spiritual door was shut on me, and I had to know how it was possible that I saw a future event. And so I literally grew up, I turned to science. And I literally grew up with a test tube in one hand and a Bible in the other. Well, let's fast forward back to the age of 18 in alien contact here. This was not your normal, let's take them up to the spaceship, probe them. This was quite the opposite. All the contact that I had was subterranean. It was always underground. It was like I was being brought to the bowels of some castle.
Yeah.
There was never any spaceship involved. Never anything that the only time that a spacecraft was involved is when it first started. Some entity appeared in my room during the night and said, "Look, the prince arrives." And I looked out the window and I could see flashing lights out the window, and I ran out the window and I see this, well, it looked like a chariot of the gods. Seriously. It was a golden chariot with golden metal horses molded into it, and it was some sort of crap.
Huh.
A man, dark beard with a crown on it, was landing it, and it was landing on the other side of the house. And I ran around to the other side and looked out the other window, and nothing was there. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly like, what did I just see? What just happened? What just went on here?
Peter, we're gonna take a break here real quick, about 5 to 6 minutes. The old bladder break, we call it. All right, and so grab yourself a drink, go to the bathroom, do what you got to do. It's going to be about 5 6 minutes, something like that. And anyway, you are listening to Show Us Don't Tell Us on the L&M Radio Network. We shall return. Tell Us on the L&M Radio Network. We've got Peter Kling with us tonight. Head on over to the website, lnmradionetwork.com or latenightinthe Join up, sign up, become a member. Head on over to the chat and listen. And some pretty good people in there. And if you get a chance, click on that donate button. We could sure use your help. The network can use your help to keep us on the air. Anyway, we are back. Welcome back, Peter and Barry. Skills.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys and gals, we're back after the break, and we switched gears just a hair early that I felt. However, Peter, good heavens, in regards to the whole alien scenario, it's all you, man. We're going to fire up chapter 2 of the book of the show, and it's all you, man.
Well, where we left off is with the landing craft, and that was really the only craft of anything that was involved. And I can't actually say whether I was physically taken or they just captured my consciousness or gave me a memory implant. I can't, and by that I mean if you've seen the movie Total Recall, where they put a memory in your mind, and to you it's as good as real. It's hard. It's hard for me to determine which was which, because from the contact, as I mentioned, I was always brought to what seemed to be the bowels of a castle. It was always underground, and my new friends here, as they presented themselves, that they were all dressed the same, and they were all dressed in what would look like a monk's robe. And it was made of very futuristic material. It was really smooth as silk, and yet had some weight to it. And I was required to wear it too when I was in their presence. And it was always hoods up, so you can only see their faces.
Right.
Couldn't really see anything else. And they were both male and female. They were slightly taller than us. And the things that they spoke about, the things that they said, were never contrary to the things that I learned, but they didn't say anything that would make me believe that they were part of, quote, God's kingdom. So because of that, I was suspicious of them. And they caught on to my suspicion, and the contact ended very kind of strangely. I was in a room with about 70 of these other creatures, and it was kind of like a Chamber of Commerce meeting, something like that, where people were talking or back and forth. Anyway,
Real quick, Peter, was this what, 64 perhaps?
the year?
Yeah.
1974.
Okay, go ahead.
June of it was the end of May, beginning of June of 1974.
Okay, go ahead.
We were talking, and one of them went up to the front of the room and asked for everybody's attention, and just simply said, "We need a volunteer to kill Peter Kling." And with that, I was toward the back of the room with my quote guide or friend here, and my eyes popped almost out of my head, and my jaw dropped, and I turned to him and I said, "Why do they want to kill me?"
It's like the crap's hitting the air conditioner. Yeah.
Yeah, and he just simply said, "Because you crossed the line." And I'm thinking, what line did I cross? And with that, boom, I was back into my room and wondering what in the world just happened. And I thought, well, this has got to be crazy. Why would they want to kill me? I didn't do anything. Well, that's the problem. I didn't do anything. It was a recruiting effort for me to become part of, to work with them, and I wouldn't because I was suspicious. I graduated high school the end of June, and in July I had the first accident that should have killed me. I wound up wrecking a motorcycle doing over 60 miles an hour with a glass jar in my pocket.
Okay.
Yeah, that was interesting. I impacted the ground, and the jar unscrewed, and the glass never broke.
Really?
Interesting. Yeah. The jar unscrewed, and the glass never broke.
Odd.
It was a couple of months after that. It was December. I bought a new car to me. It was a used car, Triumph GT6 that had wire spoke wheels with the center lug. I was going over to see a friend of mine in Knoxville, lost the left front tire off the car and rolled it down a riverbank.
Wow.
Totaled out the car and literally ran away from that one. I remember pushed back in the seat and taking the seatbelt off, climbing out of the car and running up to the road and saying, well, just blow up or burn or do something. Don't just lay there.
Right.
So
22 hours.
So Peter, you graduated in what, 73?
74.
74.
Yeah, I was one of those kids that should have never, that should have died during the high school vacation there.
Well, not only that. Well, I was just curious. Obviously, were you incorporated within the draft, even though that was the tail end of it?
That was a wild thing. Yeah, I was actually back then. They had the draft lottery, and
Right.
they came out with it when I was about 13 years old, and I always followed my number. I was always way back. 1974, I was number 26. I was one holding. I thank Richard Nixon for ending the draft.
Right.
Then after 75, it was done like a dinner, and you were good to go, along with a lot of other people to a certain extent. Yeah.
Yeah, June of 75. That's when I went in. July, actually.
Yeah, so I just missed the whole Vietnam mess by the skin of my teeth and being inducted into the man's army. So I didn't have to deal with any of that. But I was already in a situation where now what I took is that, they tried to kill me twice and they couldn't. So
Yeah.
at the age of 18, I became quite the rebel.
You're Teflon Peter. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I can't say that I skated through life, but I've survived it because there's actually been 16 attempts on my life. 16 times I should have been dead.
Wow.
Sent back. So it's been a long road.
Okay.
To say the
Okay,
least.
Peter. 16 times. Can you fill the audience in regards to that, man?
Well, I told you about two. One of these days I'll have to write them all down. My brother and I, during one of the situations which happened, which actually led to me writing letters to Earth. I had a stomach situation. My stomach stopped working for some reason, and the doctors couldn't figure out why. And I'm 6 foot tall. I actually was about 180 pounds. I went down to 114.
Wow.
Yeah, I look like an Auschwitz victim.
You think?
We'll see. At 6 foot tall, going back to the days when my dad he weighed 185. He was 6 foot tall. That was normal weight. Anymore, they've downgraded that to where, if you're 6 foot tall, you better be around 170. And they don't take into consideration your bone size as well. That's important. Not to go off on a tangent, but go ahead, man.
Yeah. Well, I would enjoy being about 175 pounds. I'm still a little bit on the light side, but that's okay. I was able to accomplish a lot. But I was down to 114, and I mean, I got out of the shower one day, looked in the mirror, and I saw a dead friend.
Your skin and bones at that point.
Yeah. And the doctor that I had obviously wasn't helping me, so I switched doctors. Just took them another 4 months to figure out what the problem was, and then I had to go under the knife and have some cutting done. During this time, I guess my family didn't expect me to survive this one either, so they all showed up. And my brother was doing some work for me because I was just incapacitated at the time. My son was really concerned. My youngest son was concerned about my health, and my brother said, "Don't worry about your dad, kid." He said, "Your dad's got more lives than a cat." And my son left the room, and we actually started counting them. And so since then, I've kept track of the things that should have killed me, and the one thing that did kill me was actually a doctor that killed me, and he left the country, and I was told he took all the records with him. Huh. So there was no way to prove what he had done or prosecute one or the other.
Yeah.
A doctor that had killed you. Can you be a little bit more explanatory in regards to that?
Yeah, I was being actually treated for another thing that should have ended my life. I had fallen through a glass table and severed all the arteries in my wrist, my right arm. I really filleted myself good. And after that, I had gotten a nerve disease, reflex sympathetic dystrophy. And it's, look it up, it's like the next worst thing to cancer, except you don't die with RSD, you just want to.
Wow.
Yeah, it's bad. But basically, the nerve kept on saying that the injury was brand new. And so the pain would never go away. And so essentially what they had to do is treat the pain by injecting painkillers, or actually they were using sodium pentothal, a cocktail of sodium pentothal is what I know that this doctor was using. Because I was asking what he was doing.
Did you tell him the truth?
Oh, you spill your guts out. You tell him everything you want to know on sodium pentothal. I did. They pumped in about 10 cc's, and they had put a tourniquet on my arm. And after he had it all pumped in and they were letting it percolate, and he started asking me questions about this, that, and I just spilled all my guts. It was like, you have no secrets that you know.
Yeah.
So it was when they took the tourniquet off, they released all of the chemical cocktail into my body, and I knew I was in trouble. And I couldn't respond in any way. The only thing I could do was move my eyes. I was totally paralyzed, and they were taking me out of the. It was outpatient, or it was outpatient surgery is what they were actually doing. But they wheeled me out of the one surgery room, and as they were wheeling me down the hall, I knew I was in deep trouble. And in 1 second, I was looking at them wheeling me from the gurney, and the next second I was looking down at them wheeling me away. And everything, once I was out of my body looking down, everything was in black and white. I was seeing color, now I was only seeing black and white. It was like a black and white movie. And I was literally being pulled away from that whole circumstance. I could see what appeared to be a little wisp of smoke coming up out of my chest. And my consciousness was enveloped in this smoky material, being pulled away from my body. And I was under deep protest. I was like, no, this can't be happening. I said, I just gotten married, had a kid. I started a new chapter of my life, and now I was dying. And I said, well, this is all beyond my control. I'm thinking this consciously after I'm out of my body. And my consciousness turns. I said, well, I don't have any choice in this matter. And so I wanted to see what was pulling me. And I was literally connected to light. And it was pulling me in just like as if I was in a stream and flowing with the current. And about halfway there, everything stopped. And then I started being pushed away. It was like it reversed, and it pushed me away. And I wound up back in my body. I can't tell you the time lapse that it took, but I wound up back in my body. And I remember coming to in the recovery room, and the doctor had come around the corner. The doctor that was treating me come around the corner, and he asked me. He asked me how I was, and the first thing that came to my mind is, "You just killed me, you SOB, and now you want to know how I am?"
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
here's my question, Peter. Did you learn anything from that particular incident?
Oh, after I was put back in my body, I had seen things of the future that one event took 10 years actually to come about, and that again was a life-changing event. It took me out of a set of circumstances, and it was something that I was shown after I was put back in my body.
But did you have a jump on that because of that particular incident?
Oh yeah, as soon as it all started to gel, it's interesting. It's funny how you just go back, you remember something like it was yesterday. I remember sitting in these folks' living room, and I looked around, and it was the same set of circumstances as what was given to me after I was put back in my body. And I said, okay, I got to get out of here. And from what I understand, about an hour after I left, a fight broke out. The police showed up.
Okay. Good timing, I'd say.
I just didn't need. Yeah, I just didn't need to be in that set of circumstances, and I wasn't surprised about what happened because it was something I'd seen just about 10 years earlier in this vision that I had. But I'll tell you what I learned more than anything else was our connection to the Creator.
Okay.
The connection that we have is fantastic, and we don't pay any attention to it, or rarely do we pay any attention to it, because you got to be in a foxhole before you stop becoming an atheist.
Yeah.
And so unless you're in those circumstances, where your last hope is prayer, why do we make it our last hope?
Right.
Well, what I always said is, like, if you're an atheist and nobody's around, you're talking to yourself.
Yeah, well, you see, now here's the thing. I wonder if atheists believe in aliens. That's a good question.
Yeah, but I mean, no matter what they believe, it's still a religion.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It just puts them in the center of the universe, if you want to call it that, with no purpose.
Yeah, it's still a religion. I mean, it all hinges on belief, and that's what a religion is.
Now it hinges on belief. Here's the thing: it's time to change our belief system. I'll tell you one more situation. I'll tell you two more situations in which I should have been dead and wasn't. Both times include what I would call my guardian angel. I was in an accident, wound up in a coma. I was in Westchester County Hospital. And somewhere in the coma, now when you're in a coma, you're actually your brain is operating at the speed of delta, from 0 to 4 hertz per second.
Right, okay.
That's theta. Well, here I am. I'm in delta. I'm in a coma. I came to once to see a bunch of ministers standing around. I feel hell.
Yeah.
But then I went back under again, and nobody ever realized that I came out just for a brief moment, but I just saw all these religious people standing around outside the room, and I figured, man, I must be really bad. but somewhere after that, um, when I had an entity come to me, and all it said was, "Come with me." And the next thing I knew, I was watching the birth of my youngest child in real time.
Huh.
All right.
Now, when somewhere the next day, when I came out of my coma, my mother was standing over me. First words out of my mouth were, "Ma, you got to make a phone call. The baby was born." That woman had the most confused look on her face. Her son just comes out of a coma, and the first thing he says, "Go make a phone call. The baby was born."
Deal right.
The confusion went away, and she gave me a reassuring, "Okay, I will." And she left, and I passed back out again. And when I came to, she was there again. She said, "Congratulations, you have a son." Now, the interesting thing is I got to see that. And an entity had come to me and brought me to the place that my child was being born at. So, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Another life form was involved, and I've credited this as my guardian angel, which I've seen a few times, but other people have seen it too. But the most interesting one was, and Barry, you may recall this, because it was this was the end of October, beginning of November 2010. I was doing some work based on events which have happened since then, which had to do with March 13th, 2013, and April 14th, 2014,
Right.
which I said were going to be earth-changing events back in October of 2010.
Right.
And one thing led to another, and I had, when I went and did the research on that, I couldn't find anything for 2013, but 2014, April 14th, 2014 was an eye-opener. That was the start of the tetrad blood moons, along with the solar eclipses, all on Jewish holidays.
Right.
And that ended a year ago, this past September, the 15th, 2015. It ended with the Pope being at the United Nations,
Right.
giving his endorsement to the post-2015 development agenda.
Yeah. Yeah. Right where he shouldn't be.
And not only that, and this is what led to me getting off the grid, but he stood in America's holy places. The United States of America, the first country which separated church and state, a republic that was bound and determined to keep religion out of politics. What was the world's highest religious leader doing in America's sacred places? The White House, the Capitol, Independence Hall, the founding places of America's freedom.
Yeah.
Are we really free from the Vatican? No, we're not. As a matter of fact, the Vatican has had control. Donald Trump will break 36 years of control of the Vatican's control of the White House.
Well,
Maybe.
we shall see.
Maybe. Well, I don't know. Didn't that all start with the motu proprio?
It actually starts with Ronald Reagan. Every president since Ronald Reagan has been a Knight of Malta. Reagan was a Knight of Malta. George Sr. was a Knight of Malta. Bill Clinton was a Knight of Malta. George Jr. is a Knight of Malta.
Right.
Obama is not a Knight of Malta, but he has a letter of endorsement from the Knights of Malta. And with all the research that we've done into his past, the best thing that we can say is a CI asset that is put into that position.
All right. So Peter, what's your take on Donald?
Donald. Boy, I'm not sure. Donald is an anomaly. I'm not going to say he's going to make America great again, but he broke the cycle of, or he'll break the cycle of the Vatican's control of the White House and the cycle of globalism of America, which would actually be supported by biblical prophecy.
Right.
The United States. I predicted that
Well,
England.
I hope in a good fashion. Go ahead, man.
In a better fashion than what it is. Let's
Right.
put it that
Okay.
way. But what we're facing goes way beyond politics, Earth
Right.
politics anyway,
Okay.
because we're
Right.
caught up in a cosmic situation,
Well, let's hear it.
not an Earth situation.
Mm.
This is for all the marbles, not just Earth,
Right. Right.
not just
Exactly.
this galaxy.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing as well is that when you become president, man, here was always my question. Now you have so much control in regards to the percentage, of control you have. It's like, okay, you're president. No, you don't run all the marbles. You don't you don't hold all the freaking marbles. At what percentage? How, in regards to how much power do they currently really have? Not so much what people see in the way it should be, but behind the scenes, what do they hold?
Very limited.
Yeah, I was just going to.
There's a shadow
let's,
government that pretty much.
yeah, let's look at England because that's a lot more observable than what we have here. And the reason why I say let's look at England, they have their parliament, which is their government, kind of like our Congress. They make the laws. They have their prime minister, similar to the president, and they have their judiciary as well. But the country isn't owned by the politicians. The country's owned by the Queen. The Queen owns somewhere between 22 and 24% of the Earth's surface.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. How about the IRS as well?
Well, now we're going to get into a whole different set of circumstances.
Yes.
The IRS is an extension of the Federal Reserve to make sure that they get their VIG for using their money.
Their collection agency.
Yeah. That's basically it. And the Federal Reserve Bank is a conglomerate of investors led by the Rothschild banking cabal. The Rothschilds have controlled of England, France, Germany, Italy, and the United States. As a matter of fact, most people have no clue why the War of 1812 was fought. The reason for the War of 1812 is because in 1811, Congress refused to give the Rothschilds their charter to continue their bank in America, the first bank of America.
Yeah.
And the Rothschilds said to the king, "Want your colonies back? We'll finance it." And that's basically what started the War of 1812. Now, the War of 1812 ended in 1815, and in 1816, the Rothschilds got their charter to establish the Second Bank of America, only to be thrown out by President Jackson, who made it his mission in his presidency to end the bank.
Yeah.
The bank didn't come back into the United States until 1913 with the Federal Reserve Act.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to believe that's partially because Woodrow Wilson was being blackmailed.
Mm-hmm.
So we got the Federal Reserve back. So when we look at the Federal Reserve, who's running the Federal Reserve? Well, it's run by a bunch of companies. Well, who own those companies? You see, the power struggle goes way beyond that. We've got to go back to biblical times again. So, like I said, everything's connected. But it's not just when we go back to biblical times, we have to go back to actually early biblical times and look at what is actually going on this planet. We know we've got aliens. We know we've got a lot of different types of aliens. We know we are not alone in this universe. However, we are under a massive misconception, and that is most people, my mother's one of the most brilliant people that I know. She can't get her head wrapped around the fact that we live in a 10-dimensional multiverse, and what is called heaven are the other 7 spatial planes outside the physical 3 planes, which our bodies cannot go to, but our consciousness can.
Uh-huh.
You see, our consciousness is not limited, especially in theta and delta. Our consciousness is not limited to the rules of the physical world. We are essentially spiritual creatures put into physical vessels in order to have an earth experience.
Right.
Now, this Earth sucks. However, the prime directive was not to have massive industry raping the planet, but for Earth to be one family, all of Adam's descendants. See, if the original purpose, if the original design for Earth, or the original order for Earth, the prime directive, was carried out, Adam would still be alive. He'd be a little over 6,000 years old, and we'd know exactly who Daddy was.
Yeah.
Now people say, 6,000 years old. Well, if you had perfect DNA, you wouldn't have old and dying. We talked about DNA looking like an infinity sign or an infinity symbol, but if it was like that, there would be no telomeres. There'd be no telomeres to lose, so that DNA would continue to replicate over and over and over again, and it wouldn't come apart.
Right.
Now people say, "Oh, but the Earth would be too populated." Well, let's go back and look at the original design.
Yeah.
Well, more than likely, Eve was designed to only have one menstrual cycle per year. Because when you read Genesis 3:17, God says, "Because you listened to the serpent, I will greatly increase your pregnancy pains, and your craving will be for your husband." Something changed. Now, what changed was had to be the actual cycle, because now Earthlings were going to die,
right?
And if we didn't reproduce like rats, we'd go extinct.
Well, here's one for you, Peter. I thought I'd run this by you. It's in a comical sense. Adam, a guy had come to Adam, and he had mentioned, he says, I'll tell you what. He says, I'll tell you after Papa gets done passing out over there. So God had come to Adam and said, no, I can. But anyways, God had come to Adam and said, I can give you an individual that will do every service all your needs, from washing the windows to caring for you to cooking and cleaning and that. And Adam said, "That's awesome, man." He says, "I'm game for that." He says,
"What's it going to cost me?"
Yeah, what's it going to cost me? He says, "A rib?" He says, "No, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg." He says, "No, I'm good to go."
Yeah, what can I get for a rib?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when we look back at the whole situation, and we go back through what is called evolution, and we substitute genetic engineering for evolution, now we have to deal with the genetic engineers. You see, so the question is, who are the genetic engineers?
Okay. All right. I've got a problem with this evolution. First of all, you have to define the word, okay? And if you're saying, that we came from amoeba or some crap like that, no, it didn't happen. But we have evolved from the Stone Age type man to who we are today. Well, that is my idea of evolution.
Well, evolution, in its sense of what Darwin proposed, was survival of the fittest. So as time goes by, the environment dictates what genetic species will survive. In other words, the genes will change in order to adapt to the environment. And he used the Galapagos Islands, where you've got limited gene pools in certain areas. The Zambezi River is a good example with the fish population.
Yeah,
they're all cichlids, but they're all so drastically different. And you can go. They say you can go 100 yards further upstream in the river and find a totally different species of cichlid that you wouldn't find downstream.
Right.
And they say, well, this is all evidence of evolution. No, it's species adapting to their environment. They're still fish.
That's right. That's right. And the thing is that exactly.
So
there is nothing, no thing that has ever changed kind, and you cannot change the kind of anything. Like you can't turn a a bird into a mammal or a fish. It ain't happening.
no, but you
Well,
see,
well,
but here's the thing: if you add additional genetic material, you now have a change.
well, Peter, let me ask you a question. Do you believe that the mind can indeed successfully outweigh the muscle?
Well, to an extent, yes, because our mind will react to something which will release hormones, which all of a sudden we have super strength. Something that as I mentioned earlier in the show, I had a fairly sedentary lifestyle, and all of a sudden it became physical. And I was doing physical labor at an extent that I'd never done since I was a teenager. And I actually, through prayer meditation, I actually got the body of a teenager back.
Right. Well, you're not a spring chicken, and neither am I, even though you're 9 years older than me. But
Right.
yeah.
We got a caller. Ira's on the line. Hi, Ira. How you doing?
Hey guys, thanks for letting me call in here. I just wanted to add in, Peter, you're on the right track. You were talking about, well, Papa, you were on the right track too with the species can't change, and I was going to toss in here real quick, outside of genetic manipulation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You see, once
Yeah.
once you change the genes, if you add more genetic information, that thing can never be the same again.
Right.
It's 7%. We share 7% of our DNA with the daisy. And as I mentioned earlier, science, since they've uncovered or unraveled the human genome, you can take one strand of DNA and repopulate all life on planet Earth.
Yes. Now,
It's
see,
all there.
Peter, that's one thing I was going to ask you about it. Your thoughts regarding, because this is my own personal theory with things, and I'd love to get your thoughts with it too. Okay, so here's my theory. DNA, the genes that are there, right? They carry the data for all different potential forms of life within its strands, and depending on where that DNA is, basically you could look at it as the DNA takes a look around, sees what environment it's in. Okay, the weather tends to be this.
Right.
The acidic levels of everything tend to be this. The pH level tends to be this. The oxygen levels, nitrogen levels, so on and so forth. Are we underground? Are we above ground? Are we in water? Are we out of water? All of these things are taken into account, and it says, okay, I have this set of 5 billion possible potential life forms that could exist within this particular set of circumstances. So which one is going to be here? And essentially that is the cue for the adaptation to take place that allows for those different life forms to come to fruition, essentially.
Well, yeah. When we go back to what we could call the beginning, where the earliest life forms on this planet were cyanobacteria, which still exist today. We still have, we've got evidence of ancient cyanobacteria, and we've got a brand new cyanobacteria.
Even ones that we carry within our bodies, yeah.
Yeah, and so now, once you take that cyanobacteria and add more genetic material to it, it's no longer cyanobacteria. So, yeah, the theory of evolution that there's a trail that we came out of the swamps, there's some truth to that, but it wasn't that we evolved without extra manipulation.
Well,
That's my thought
extra
too,
genetic material had to come from somewhere.
right. In science, they use culture samples and they grow their own different parts depending on the environment, and the environment will dictate what that is going to be it either bone or skin or what have you.
Well, something that they're doing, I forgot what the name of the company is, but they're trying to get a patent to grow human organs in pigs, which means that they go in, they manipulate the DNA So instead of the pig, they would splice human DNA into the pig where it needs to grow a heart. So instead of the pig growing a pig heart, it grows a human heart.
Well, we know
Same
where the
thing with the
Muslims
liver,
won't
the
get
lungs,
their
and kidneys.
we know where
Yeah,
the
well,
Muslims
that's
won't get their body parts from.
well, right,
Yeah.
right. Not only
So
that, but that incorporates and intertwines within your DNA, correct?
correct, because that pig, the heart, the information on the DNA for that pig's organs aren't pig DNA; they're human DNA.
Right, right.
And so that pig is going to grow a human heart.
That, by the way, that's at the University of California, Davis. That's doing that work primarily. Yeah,
So
they're doing it. They're injecting the human DNA into the pig embryos and trying to go from there.
So now, if you were doing gene splicing right from the beginning, you're creating a different. You could create a totally different animal.
Yeah, we're talking about the island of Dr. Moreau, all in a scientific basis.
Yeah, so it's basically like that. So when you get, the legends of Atlantis and Lemuria, where we've got these ancient civilizations which were so
Right.
advanced. Well, were they the genetic engineers who stopped by from time to time? All indications would prove so, because we have a whole book. It's called the Holy Bible, and it speaks about very openly about several different what we would call alien life forms. They're alien to Earth, and you have to question why this entity that we know as Satan or the devil, which means slanderer or deceiver, such an interest in the humans on planet Earth. Why does his dog in the fight? Why does this interdimensional, that this, what was a very splendid creature of God, creation of God, why did he turn, and why does he think he has such a dog in this fight? You see, it's all there. We just have to decode it and understand it in a capacity that we can make sense of it without the religious hocus pocus all over it. That there are. So somebody actually corrected me. I said there were over 38,000 different sects of Christianity, and then somebody told me not too long ago, well, there's over 40,000 now.
Yeah, it is. It's about 42,000 at this point. Yep.
You have 42,000 different flavors of Christianity. Wasn't there only one Christ? Did Jesus give 42,000 different messages?
Every one of them thinks that they're right, and every one of them says that the others are wrong
Yeah,
and doomed.
Yeah, so wait a minute.
Yeah, but you got to read the book.
They can't all be right, and they can't all be wrong, or can they? You see,
It depends on their
thousand
doctrine.
divisions are all set in dogma. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can't learn anything with dogma. You
Right.
got to go back to the sciences. And so
Right.
when we go back to string theory, which says we live in a 10-dimensional multiverse, and we're dimensions 8, 9, and 10, well, there's life in dimensions 8, 9, and 10. We know that. It's all around us.
Yeah.
Life wants to exist. Now, why wouldn't there be life in dimensions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Considering they
Because there's
came
not.
first.
Exactly.
Well, I mean,
Peter, what you're discussing here, there was a book that I read some years ago. It's a science fiction novel. It's called Noah, and I was trying to find here while we were talking the name of the author that wrote it. It was a lady. I cannot remember her name for the life of me. But the book is called Noah, and it's a science fiction book. Now, what she did, she was positing basically that an advanced technological civilization existed before the time of Noah, before the time of the Great Flood, and that this technological civilization was doing genetic manipulation of different creatures, combining human and animal DNA, combining different animal types DNAs together, and we get like the chimeras, all of the different, Minotaur is, just a genetic anomaly that they created accidentally in a lab and that kind of thing, so on and so forth. And that the reason why God wanted to bring the flood was because the inhabitants had become so genetically altered through their technology that the Christ, the Messiah, would not be able to come to fruition because his bloodline would be completely tainted. It wouldn't have gone from Adam forward. It would go from Adam into a lamb, into a lion, into a bull, into on and on and on. So that there had to be a cleansing of the genetic base, so to speak, to restart basically with Noah. And Noah essentially was the only ones. His family were the only ones that had an untainted bloodline. And it was a very interesting novel how she put that it was due to this genetic manipulations that were being done through the advanced technological society. Their sciences basically brought this forth, essentially.
Well, she must have read the book of Enoch.
Yeah, those were the giants, weren't they? I mean, it wasn't that where yeah, they were separate from Adam and Eve.
Yeah, when we look at the biblical account, it talks about I believe it's in Genesis the 6th chapter, where it talks about the sons of the true God saw that women were becoming popular.
Right.
Well, the earth was becoming populated with good-looking women.
Yeah.
And the account says, so they took wives for themselves, all whom they chose. And it was through impregnation of earth women that they produced the Nephilim, which were hybrid offsprings of these interdimensionals that took on physical human bodies and mated with women. Now, when we go to Greek mythology, we find that, look at Pan. He's half goat, half human. And then you got the satyrs, which are half horses with, human torso and head.
Yeah.
So you have to raise the question, did they also engage in bestiality besides mating with women? Because it would have been viewed as the same thing. It was interspecies breeding.
Yeah, exactly. Ellen Gunderson Traylor, that's the name of the lady that wrote that book. I definitely recommend. It's an excellent book. It's an awesome book. I love it. But yeah,
I've heard her. I've heard of her. I've not read any of her work though.
Well, in regards to this bestiality BS, what is the advantage? I mean, what's the goal?
Well, back then the goal was to, as Ira brought up through this book, was actually to disrupt the possibility of having the Messiah come.
Yeah.
That
was the full intention of it, was to make it so that the Messiah would not be possible, because it would be a tainted bloodline throughout the entirety of the human species. Nobody would be untainted.
Yeah, if that was allowed to go on, well, the earth was becoming destroyed, it said, and God had felt regret that he had created man to begin with. So everything was truly out of sync. But when you look back at that era, especially when you read the information in the book of Enoch, there was a lot of technology that had transpired pre-flood. Especially in areas of metallurgy, in medical science, medicines, earth's roots and herbal medicines. Those things were all technologies that were given to humans by the sons of the true God.
Alchemy.
And had been done throughout, not just in the Middle East civilizations, but throughout the entire planet.
Yeah, well, when we find after the flood, we get 3-4 generations, and we had, with the 4th generation, we get Nimrod and the start of the Sumerian Empire.
Right.
And we can trace all religion. I don't care which religion it is. We can trace it all back to the Sumerian Empire, and now we have to bring in all the Sumerian gods along with it. And every religion has been an offshoot from that Sumerian Empire.
Sure, exactly. I mean, if you read your Bible correctly, Abraham himself was from the Sumerian Empire. It was an offshoot directly of it. He was from Ur. Ur was a Sumerian city. Everything that happened through Abraham, was a play off of the Sumerian religion and the Sumerian knowledge that he had. He was not a dumb person. He was not a dumb person. He was actually one of the very high lords of the Sumerian Empire.
And
Yeah,
Paul was a
and
Freemason.
now that I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's
the Masons will
interesting.
tell you that. Paul was a
Uh,
Freemason.
that
Uh,
there's a question which really I have not been able to find the answer for yet, and the biblical scholars that I've talked to don't seem to have an answer for it either. And that was, why did Yahweh direct Abraham to leave Ur, which was a key city in the Sumerian Empire? It was a showcase city, and from there he lived. His family occupied this quote promised land, but they wind up in Egypt for 400 years. It's like, wait a minute, we went from the frying pan into the fire,
yeah.
and the gods are the same or are similar, just different names. And we find that we keep track of the world empires from Egypt, but it goes Egypt, Assyria, Babylonia, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the Anglo-American, or England and the United States, as the last world power. Um, and that's the same gods have been involved in all of those world empires. They basically all had the same religious deities with different names. Now, some had more, some had less, and some deities were more cruel than others. But the bottom line is, we are still under the laws of these ancient empires. Admiralty law is a good example. Admiralty
Yeah.
law was invented by the Canaanites,
Yeah.
and then essentially put into law by the Phoenicians, who were fantastic sailors. But that is where we are under Admiralty law, due to the Canaanite population, which Israel, when they went into the Promised Land, failed to wipe out all the Canaanites. There was a reason for that. The Canaanites were also child sacrificing. It was a child sacrificing cult.
Yeah.
They would worship Baal in the spring through libacious orgies in order to induce the Baal's rain, the rain which they viewed as Baal's sperm, to fertilize the ground and make everything grow. And then if you were a first-time orgy goer and you got pregnant, guess what you got to do with your child in the fall? Offer it up to
Sacrifice.
Molech.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
First fruits to Molech. So, and archaeologists have uncovered areas where they're just piles of children's bones, and they don't understand how these people were allowed to exist in these civilizations with all the child sacrifice that they had.
Yeah.
It baffles modern archaeologists. So, and that cult still goes on
You
today.
did a lot of that in Canada.
Yeah, well, it's worldwide,
Yeah.
and it goes back. It goes back to a subject I hate to get into because it's just so black and so dark, and that's Loosh. Loosh is the capturing of the human soul, and it's supposed to be the most potent drug on the intergalactic market, and aliens love Loosh. And it's captured from the youngest children in a sacrificial ritual. They're literally bled to death.
And anybody's right mind, my God, I just can't imagine doing that. I mean, if what and is for what your benefit, and to what extent? Come on, man, really?
It's child trafficking. Just take the United States. 750,000 children vanish every year. You know, the kids that you see on the milk cartons.
Oh yeah.
They can account for 250,000 of them. They were either abducted by one parent or a relative, or they're kidnapped, they were killed, or whatever the case might be. 500,000 vanish every year, and there's never a trace found.
Yeah.
It's funny too, Peter, because louche, the word louche means to disappealing or disrespectful in a disgusting and appalling kind of way, and I think that is a pretty fitting word.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, when I first started going down this rabbit hole it's got to be 6-7 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. I was posting different things that I found on Facebook, and I had a Facebook friend who claimed to be the nephew of a current Knights Templar say, if you continue, give me a warning. He said, if you continue to go down this path, they will come and find you and kill you.
Okay.
So considering all the other attacks that I've had, I just said, that's just such a dark subject. I don't need to go down that path. I took the warning.
Yeah.
So, he wasn't being threatening. He was giving me a warning for my own benefit. He said, you really don't want to go down that path.
Well, it brings to mind this whole Pizzagate thing going on. All of that is tied right into all of the stuff that you're talking about there, Peter. It's all about the use and abuse of the children for the power players' benefit. And each time that it's done, it's done in a ritualistic kind of way. It's done in a sacrificial type of a way, and it's just absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
Well, you see, they're all being controlled by the same gods that started religion to begin with.
Yeah,
Yahweh,
exactly.
Yahuwah, Jehovah, whatever translation you want to use for the Almighty's name, had nothing to do with religion. That's why when you go to the prophecies, you go to Revelation. There's 2 chapters dedicated to the fall and the destruction of religion. If God wanted religion, why is it going to get destroyed?
Yeah.
The purpose was family.
Christ
and
was not
family.
a Christian.
Excuse me?
Christ was not a Christian.
No, Christ was a Jew.
He was the best Jew that you could be. He literally was the ultimate epitome of Jew. You can't get around that idea.
He was a Palestinian Jew.
Yeah.
So, as Lewis Black put it, he was as Jewy Jew you could get. He was the King Jew. That's beyond a shadow of a doubt. That was the whole point and purpose of it.
Thank God, Ira, Lewis Black is picking up pace where George Carlin had left.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
I agree. Guys, I do have to take off here, but Peter, it's always so great to talk to you, and I'm glad to be able to call in tonight and say hey to you. Pick your brain a little bit and make you think.
We'll have to get over to your
Thanks for calling in, Ira.
Yeah, you bet. You guys have a great night.
Always a pleasure, Ira. Take care, brother.
And you know what? We're gonna have to take a break here. And then we'll get back to it. What do you think? Sounds like a plan.
Absolutely. We have a lot more to talk about, especially with our alien friends.
Well, we've got another hour to go here, and believe me, our alien friends will be talked about. You're listening to Show Us, Don't Tell Us on the LNM Radio Network. We'll be right back. Every now and then. Goodness, I got the wrong buttons here. Anyway, welcome back to Show Us, Don't Tell Us on the LNM Radio Network. I'm Papa Bear, and of course, Skills, you're still hanging out with us, right?
Yes, I am. Well, I'm trying to, but anyways, guys and gals, welcome to the show. And we currently have our guest for tonight, Peter Kling. And it was really nice. Ira, thanks for dropping in, man. That was awesome, as always. And Ira Robinson is indeed an encyclopedia of knowledge. Believe me when I tell you that. He has a memory like an elephant. I wouldn't lie to you. Oh, abso-freaking-lutely. And I don't know if Peter's back in here yet.
I'm with you.
There he is. All right. It's
Welcome
all you,
back,
brother.
Peter.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Ira's got a fantastic. He remembers details about stuff. It's like, wait a minute, man. I wish I've got to study stuff in order to remember it.
He's phenomenal.
And it's and then yet I still have to go back and restudy things just to totally understand them at times. Other things I just get instantly. I just we just know things sometimes, and when we know things, it's best just to go with that. Um,
Peter, real quick, 1985, Stephen Wright, I don't know if you're familiar with that
Yep.
comedian, but Stephen Wright would say, I used to have a photographic memory till I ran out of film. Go ahead, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked his comment about he's got the largest seashell collection. He keeps it on the shores of the
Yep.
world.
Yeah, you can locate it on the beaches of the world, yeah, right?
Yeah.
He's got an interesting sense of humor.
We're talking about genetics and DNA, and I was thinking, diarrhea runs in the genes, right?
Never
mind.
Supposed to an extent.
If you're wearing jeans. Anyway.
The interesting thing is where we are in the stream of time is it's a turning point. It's a turning point not just in world history, but in cosmic history. Cosmic, going beyond the universe, reaching all the dimensions. While we can go on and through M theory and superstring theory, we can say, well, there's the infinite possibility. And yeah, that is true. However, sticking with the basics and just sticking within our own 10-dimensional multiverse is more than enough that most people can handle. We always have to reduce things back into the physical world in order to get to comprehend them. And that's far from the reality of the situation as the best that research can tell. We're dealing with entities that we know very little about, almost nothing about. The things that we do know aren't taught. I mean, we don't even know about us, who we are, let alone life within the multiverse.
Okay.
Everything. Go ahead, Barry.
Let me kind of wrap this into a nutshell. From the picture I see, okay, you've got the demons that were cast out of heaven down to the earth, and they live in the earth. And of course, these demons, they don't come out. They hate us humans, if you will. And the only thing that protects us humans from them is invoking Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And
that is an extremely powerful weapon.
Yeah, there's some sort of a vice there. There's something there. I mean, they know that they're done over a period of time. No doubt about it. But it's the nature of the beast. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. You see, let's go back to the creation of man, modern man. Okay. When we look at the fossil record, we've got this whole string that they've put together for us, right down to Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon, and they say, we are a lot like both. We carry both their genes. Well, of course we do. We can rebuild planet Earth with what we have, or repopulate all life on planet Earth with our genetics. So we are the pinnacle of creation, and we are the ones who are made in the image of God, not the physical image, but at the soul level.
Right. Now,
our soul is our consciousness and life force.
Right. Exactly.
Our physical body is just a vessel for that consciousness and life force. Now when I say that, think of a vase.
We're tuned to it.
Yes. But you see, anything beyond physical, we know almost nothing about. Well, at least until lately. And the thing that we've been able to really come to understand is our own mental capabilities. And yet these are not taught within the schools. There's some very simple sciences out there that can be taught that kids just do automatically because they're already in alpha.
Yeah, of course not, yeah.
All you have to do is get them to program the brain properly. And it's deprogramming all the garbage that we've been given.
And that's the problem. So in other words, we're defaulting our children into the beta.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially by giving them the latest and greatest technology of, cell phones or smartphones or whatever the case might be. Buying them all these electronic gadgets. It's interesting. I see the toys that my grandkids have, and
It's
half of them need
sidetracking. Yeah.
electric.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talk about video games. You've got your war games, which put you in fight or flight right in the game.
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, was it Call of Duty was released by the military. They were used it to teach soldiers first before it was released as a game for kids.
Right.
So now
that
you've got a 10 or 12-year-old who's been playing Call of Duty for 10 years, joins the military. He's got all this tactical knowledge all built into him.
Right.
And we try to bring it into children soldiers. Come on. We're training these kids right on video games just like they on simulators.
Yeah. Grand Theft
So-
Auto.
Yeah.
we're teaching.
What's that?
It's only a video game, and and I can understand that. It's only a video game. I used to play it myself, but that was a while ago. But it still, I mean, in some instances, it's fight anyway, for the most part, or flight. The cops are chasing you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we can see that with what happened with this last election, the young adults or the kids in universities, and I'll call them kids, young adults.
Oh my God.
They are in sad shape. They'll believe anything you tell them. It doesn't have to be right or wrong.
Well, like I've said, this place really does need a cleansing.
Yeah,
It really does.
And so,
and I know exactly how, pretty much, how God felt when he said he was sorry he made mankind. I mean, you look around, it is a disappointment.
well, here's the thing, Barry. We're seeing a separation now. Remember, the parable of the sheep and goats, or the wheat and the weeds.
Right.
There is a ungodly people, or say a godless people,
Right.
that is coming onto the scene now, and it's not just the kids. Religion has more people believe in aliens than they do believe in God.
Right.
Last time I looked at the numbers, 63% of people, 61% of people believed in aliens, 53% believed in God.
Yeah, well, you've got aliens, all right, but they're not outer world, they're inner world. And they hate you.
Well, look at what it says in Revelation 12. War broke out in heaven, and Michael and his angels did battle with the great dragon and its angels, and no place was found for them any longer. They did not prevail, and so down to the earth they were cast.
Right.
So guess what? We got aliens.
They're here.
Now, they're here. Yes, they're not from some distant galaxy.
And like it says, they live in the earth. In the earth.
Now, where was I taken? When I had my...
You were taken in the earth.
Somewhere, yeah, spaceships had nothing to do with it. Now interestingly enough, I don't know if you've ever had, probably not because of the time of day, but Karen Udis brought this up, and it led me to do some investigative work. I thought when she first got into this that her cheese had slid off her cracker. I really did.
Well, she's halfway off her cracker.
Well, I haven't talked to her in quite some time. For some reason, we don't get along. I always wind up insulting her somehow.
Well, it's because she's insulting.
Well,
that's the kind of person she is.
I've actually done 3 interviews with her, 3 or 4. And she for some reason, she just can't remember me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, the only retaliation I had with her one day was I said, look, I've already lost everything I had. They're not going to take any more. They've already got it all. So, believe me, you're not going to hurt my feelings.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm in the same boat. But she brought up Homo capensis. And I was like, yeah, okay, what's a banker doing talking about Homo capensis?
All right, let me ask you a question, Peter, real quick in regards to that. What's that mean?
Homo capensis is supposed to be the elongated head species of human which once controlled this earth.
Right.
And the story is, now this isn't my information, this is what Karen brought up and other people that have done research on it, is that they live underground. They still control the planet and the people who are in charge of this planet. In other words, the Rothschilds and the Oppenheimers and the Bushes and the Clintons and those entities that are
Soros and all the
yeah. So they're doing their bidding for them, and the whole goal is to turn everyone away from the Creator, to get everyone not to be part of Christ's kingdom or be a child of Yahweh.
And it wouldn't surprise me that this all originates right through the Vatican.
Well, yes, it does. That's why it's all going to be exposed and torn down. You know, interesting thing, we talked about child sacrifice briefly. The Vatican owns 20,000 orphanages and children's homes around the world.
Yeah.
Man, you want to talk about having a source for
and
a commodity.
And the pedophilia that went on, and also the dead bodies that they found in Canada. International ITCC. Yeah, International Tribunal.
Yep.
Kevin Annett. You know, it got no traction, but hey, at least it was out there.
Absolutely. You know, they tried to push this, and well, why didn't it get traction? Because they're all a bunch of baby sacrificing hypocrites.
Well, yeah. I mean, they don't dare step on any toes. You know, they're employees of. They don't want to step on those toes, right?
You know, there probably isn't enough time to get into a lot of this, but I want to focus really on one major thing, and that's who we are, and the power we can cultivate.
Okay.
Now, when I say power, it's a consciousness. It's not a physical power. We can't turn water into wine yet.
Right.
We will someday, but not yet. But we are captains of our own ship. We're captains of the vessel. Even if the pirates capture the vessel, we are still the captain of our own ship, so to speak. And so we have free will. We can still do what we want. Now, here's the thing. There'll never be an alien that'll turn around. Well, I shouldn't say never. There hasn't been an alien that can turn around and get you to do anything that you will not go along with, because we all have free will.
Yeah.
We as humans can't get other humans to agree because we all have free will.
Right.
But it's taken that free will. It's that free will which allows us to create the future for us. And when we stop looking at the past and stop accepting the current paradigm, then we can break free and start creating. And it's, we do it every day. We just be sitting down and say, I feel hungry. Wonder what if I think I'll have a cheese sandwich. So what do? You get up, you go to the refrigerator, you take out whatever the cheese and the bread and whatever condiments, you make your sandwich. Well, that cheese sandwich didn't exist 5 minutes before that.
Right.
You got up and took action and created a future event, one which you foresaw.
Right.
I mentioned going on vacation. We used to go you go online now and you think about where you want to go and say, I want to go to the Bahamas. So you find the island that you want to go to and you look in there and, here's the hotel, and you see their amenities and all the different things that they offer, and you start thinking, man, I'd like to do some water skiing or some snorkeling or just lay in the sand. You start daydreaming about that.
Yeah.
And you start creating, you think about the things that you want to do, and guess what? Eventually, we turn that fantasy into a reality. So, I got to save up X amount of dollars. I want to, because this is what I want to do. And so you book the trip and you go. But once upon a time, that event was only a fantasy.
Right.
See, so as the scripture says, faith without works is dead.
Right.
If you have faith in something and you're working toward that,
right,
we can accomplish our goal. forever, well, what seemed to be forever, I tried to figure out what was the formula for success.
Yeah.
And the formula breaks down. The formula is really simple. It has to do with I broke it down into three different parts. It's our power of intention, fueled by our passion or our desire for that outcome, and motivated by love.
Right. Okay.
So,
Intention,
in other words, you can successfully see through it, right?
yes. If you have the intention to do something and you have the passion to get it accomplished,
Right.
and you're doing it out of a state of love,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to succeed. If what we do helps us and one other person, we will always succeed. But it all starts off as a fantasy, something that we see within our own mind.
Right.
And we say, oh, I want that. It's like you see a good-looking gal and you want to get to meet her. Well, if you don't go up and say hello, she'll never know you exist.
Right.
So it remains that fantasy. Or, if you're a gal and you want to meet a guy, if you don't go up and say hello, you may miss your chance to meet that person.
Right.
So it's taking our own power. Now, understanding who we are and where we connect that power from. As I said, when we were working off the grid, there was a lot of time for spiritual connection. I spent a lot of my day in prayer and meditation as I was working. I didn't have to, stop and sit down and, bow my head and close my eyes and, do some ritual prayer. It was a communication. It was a mental communication, and I was asking for things. I don't know if anybody knows what no-see-ums are, or see-me-nots.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Tiny little bugs that will bite the crap out of you.
Oh, yeah.
And you can barely see them, and occasionally you'll feel them. And, toward the evening, all of a sudden, we'd crop, a swarm of see-me-nots would come. Well, I would actually go into prayer. And I'd say something like, Lord, I don't know why you created these, but I would appreciate if you would stop them from sucking the blood of your servant.
Yeah.
And they would stop.
Huh.
Seriously, they would stop.
Oh.
Yeah, think about that. So,
Right.
It's all about how you approach the situation. Do you have faith? Well, hey, I wasn't being eaten up. Before I started doing that, my favorite cologne was Old Woodsman mosquito repellent up there. Get rid of the see-me-nots and mosquitoes. It's an all natural.
Not Old Spice, huh? Okay.
No, it wasn't Old Spice. It was Old Woodsman. It's actually made in Maine, and it's made for the mosquitoes and the see-me-nots.
Should have gone with high karate.
Yeah.
But even that would wear off. But once I started praying about it, it was funny. My son would be complaining about being eaten up by see-me-nots, and I was just fine.
Well, I always think about lay your burdens on me, and I'll take care of them, right? And
Yeah.
and I thought about that years ago when someone who was close to me passed away, and I was really, really hurt by it. And I I prayed, and as soon as I prayed, it was like that whole weight just lifted. It was gone,
Yep.
totally gone.
Like flipping a light switch.
You know what? And it went away so fast that I actually felt guilty. You know?
Well, the reason being is because you felt as though it was too easy. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now here's the mechanism of it. You see, because we are made in God's image.
Yeah.
Well, guess who the Father is? What child, and this is even written, a child doesn't ask for a loaf of bread and is handed a snake.
Right.
The Father wants to grant the child's wishes. And we do that with our own children, with our grandchildren. And it was a long time. it took quite a while to develop a lot of these concepts in order to comprehend exactly what's going on. But once we leave that beta fight and flight where we're in a reactionary state and step back and go into that alpha, we can make a connection. Our brain starts to make that connection wherever we want to go. Now we start praying, guess what? You go right to the source of all energy, a dimension of nothing but God particle, pure conscious energy at its most pure state. That's what we actually tap into. It's the energy of everything. In essence,
Peter,
live inside of what we call God.
there's one thing that has worked for me every single time, and in regards to prayer or whatever, is it's not like you can't ask God. It's like, well, oh God, I want to hit the lottery. Oh God, I need this. Ask God to give you the strength to get a hold of yourself and make things happen, and it's worked every time. When you go
Yeah.
about it, and you don't have to say it out loud. You can sit back and say, just give me the strength to make things happen. It works every time, every time, every time.
I think I was about 14 years old. 14, yeah, it's right around there. And I was reading, I forget exactly where it is, but when God asked Solomon what he wants, and Solomon says he wanted wisdom. And Yahweh was so pleased with that he gave him wisdom and then everything else. And I thought, I guess I ought to pray for wisdom. So since I was 14, I always prayed for wisdom. Now, wisdom is what you get when you didn't expect what you wanted.
Yeah, exactly. Be careful what you ask for, right? You might get it.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
but, here's the thing. Why should people listen to what I say? I've lived through an experience where extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, whatever you want to call them, have wanted me dead. And it
Right.
goes way beyond that because it goes back 500 years. Barry, you asked about when I started learning the Bible.
Yeah.
I could never quite get the connection, although I understood that this group of people were part of the Bride of Christ. They were the last that we know of them were the 7 congregations of Asia Minor.
Okay.
We know a little bit of history of them in Rome when they were persecuted and used in the games. And then they vanish. And they don't come back on the scene until the Reformation.
Okay.
And then they vanish after the Reformation, and they don't come back on the scene again until the turn of the 20th century, which is kind of odd. Now,
Right.
here's the wild part, and I just learned this last March, and that is part of my family history. I knew part of my great-grandmother's line, and they were French Huguenots, and they left France because of religious persecution and went to Germany. But what I didn't know was my great-grandfather's history. I knew bits and pieces, but I didn't know back to what I'll call the beginning, which takes us exactly right back to the Reformation. As it turns out, my family, along with others, hid Martin Luther while he was translating the Bible from Latin into German so it could be printed on the Gutenberg press. And because of his stance against the church and my family's stance with Martin Luther, they were all excommunicated. And the church actually put a death warrant on my family. And for 200 years, right up to the Napoleonic Wars, the Klings, which were actually, the original name was Klingenschmidt, we were bell makers and armor makers, armor and swords, for the princes of Germany. And we were actually hunted down and murdered for over 200 years. Wherever they could find us, they killed us.
Well, like Tesla.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, one of my ancestors was the first documented white American Indian chief. And his name was White Peter His name was John Peter Klingenschmidt, but they called him either Great Peter or White Peter. Interesting.
He was a German Indian. Yeah.
Yeah. He was actually born in America. His parents, his father and uncle immigrated to the United States. They escaped Germany, went to Holland. It wasn't the United States; it was America back then. They landed in Philadelphia and migrated west. They built Fort Klingenschmidt, which is now the town of Jeannette, Pennsylvania. It's just east of Pittsburgh. And it was there that John Peter was captured by the Seneca Indians and then traded to the Oneida Indians. It was in the Oneida Indians that he became chief, and he was actually ambassador to the Seven Nations.
Well, what is it about Pennsylvania? Because I mean, I'm German, and my parents and my grandparents had migrated to Pennsylvania, Carnegie, Pennsylvania. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And then they all left there. I mean, what is it in regards to Germans where they migrated back in the day to Pennsylvania, you know?
A lot of it was because of what was going on in Europe. You have to remember that Germany was first decimated by Napoleon, so
right, yeah,
there was constantly wars going on. But the reason for my family, they came over in the later 1600s. So long before the Napoleonic Wars. But yeah, it seems like, they would land at Pittsburgh or Philadelphia and then move west. So they were escaping death by the church. Now, while the Napoleonic Wars ended that, I doubt that the church ever rescinded that order. Now we'll go back, and who does the church work for? Are we back to Homo capensis? Are we back to these people that live underground and control the planet? Right. Are they the ones who put a death warrant on me when I was 18?
Right.
See, it comes full circle because it comes right back to what my family did 500 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's like, is there any doubt that I would have wound up where I did? No, because of there was a reason why I was preserved alive through 16 times that I should have been dead.
Right. My family came here in 1640. They wound up in Massachusetts, and they just spread out. You ever hear of Bixby, Oklahoma? There you have it. It's a big city.
My goodness.
Yeah.
So, when we start tracking back where we came from and how we got here, we got to where we are, and this is the most important time in history that we're facing. It's time to understand really who we are. And it's not so much our ancestry, because when we go back far enough, we're all cousins. We're all related. I don't care if you're black, white, green, purple, yellow, whatever, red, whatever you are. As long as you're you, we are all cousins.
Right.
We're divided by nationality, by race, by religion. We find reasons to divide. Well, we're given reasons to divide.
Yeah.
And that's time to stop, because they want to divide us up. And without having a support group for each other, we'll only be fighting each other. And isn't that what we are seeing with these protests? Oh, we want Donald Trump. Oh, we'll beat the crap out of you. Well, wait a minute.
What made this country great is that we were united.
And the last time that we were fully united in anything, believe it or not, was the Gulf War, the first war. The president's rating was up through the roof, and this is George Sr., the only president, the second president to only serve one term, elected president, I should say. Because by the time he was done, everybody hated him. Yeah. They wanted to go with Slick Willie.
Yeah.
Another Knight of Malta. Now, how does think about this? How do you wind up with two Knights of Malta? How do you wind up with a string of Knights of Malta, which are subject to the Pope and the Vatican?
Yeah.
How do they wind up becoming president of the United States and running the country?
Now, where does Trump fall into that? I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah, Trump is, to the best of my knowledge, he is not a Knight of Malta. He's not connected to the Vatican. He claims to be Presbyterian. How religious he is, I really don't particularly care.
Is he left-handed?
He's not one of the cousins either, to the best of my knowledge. Every president of the United States is a cousin through King John I of England, except for Martin Van Buren. Trump will be the second president, I believe, not to be a cousin.
Is he
So
left-handed?
I believe he's right-handed.
He'd be the first.
I believe I saw him signing something in a video with his right hand. Yeah, he'll be the first.
He'd be the
Really?
first.
So,
yeah.
so, Papa. In other words, we had a numerous amounts of southpaws in there.
All of them.
Really?
Every one of them.
I'm learning something new.
Yep. All southpaws.
Wow.
The reason behind that is southpaws think with their right hemisphere as opposed to thinking with their left hemisphere.
Yeah.
All I know is left-handers are very good at art.
Mhm.
They can draw like there's no tomorrow. I've watched
Normally,
it throughout
yeah.
my years, and I'm 52. I've watched all the guys.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We're all over 50. I had a very interesting revelation when I was 49, and that was that I was older than 2/3 of the world's population and knew more than 95% of the world's population knew. And I said, I ain't going to take anybody's crap anymore.
Right.
I had my own independence. It took to that point to get it, but I had my own independence of saying, hey, it's time to start taking this the way that I wanted to do it and not being what everybody else wanted me to be.
Right.
And so,
Right.
here's a message to all of us. We're all old. We're all up in years, as you might say. None of us spring chickens anymore. And hopefully we'll have a very, very, very long time to go. And if things work out right, we will. But we have the knowledge and experience through years and through circumstances to start to decode this stuff and start to comprehend exactly what's going on. And the sciences are catching up to what the scriptures say, so we can understand what is actually written within the scriptures and say, yeah, this makes sense. It has nothing to do with religion and everything to do with
Right.
alien forces controlling this planet.
Right. And even Tesla wanted to design something to free the people and put them in that perspective.
See
Yeah.
now, Nikola, he was Serbian, correct?
Yeah.
I believe.
Yes.
He was awesome, man. He got blackballed. He got blackballed. Thomas Edison. Yeah. You finish the story.
Anybody who tells the truth is going to have a problem. With myself, I got too close. I had a major problem for writing letters to Earth. 2 weeks after I sent my manuscript to my publisher, my phones were tapped, all of them. And I say, well, how do you? That's paranoid. No, I worked for Ma Bell for 15 years. I used to listen to the line quality as part of my job. So all of a sudden, I got an extra set of switches. Where'd they come from?
Yeah. Right.
And there were mechanical switches too. It was like, come on, this is supposed to be a digital network. Why do I have mechanical switches on a digital network?
Consider yourself lucky, man. People really care about you.
No,
Yeah, key people.
only one cares about me, and that's the Creator. Because I have to say, there's only one reason that I'm alive, and that's because of the hand of God, which I got to see personally, or what I could call personally. This was going back to, I started to tell the story earlier. I'll be brief with it. It goes back to the end of October, beginning of November of 2010. I was bringing my son home from college on a road that I used to love to drive. Very nice road. I had just set my cruise control for 63 miles an hour. And within 30 seconds of doing that, I had, the only time I ever saw a deer cross this road, I had a huge buck jump out of the wood line and try to jump over my car. Its hoofs hit the edge of the road, and the next leap it was jumping over the road right in front of my car, right at windshield height. While it was in the air, a blue orb about the size of a cantaloupe or so appeared between the deer and myself. It blew up like a balloon and absorbed the shock.
Huh.
I have pictures of the car, and it looks like You look at the windshield, and there's a round depression in the windshield.
Did did your windshield get busted, or can you see prints going over the top of the vehicle?
I hit this deer square. I mean,
Oh,
square
right.
right in the windshield at close to 60 miles an hour. Of course, as soon as I saw it jump out of the wood line, I hit the brake, so I can't tell you. But it was instant. It only took 2 seconds less. I said one word, which I can't repeat on the air, and it was over. And in that amount of time, a blue orb appeared out of nowhere and absorbed the shock. Interesting. That was on a Friday evening. The
Right.
second story on the news Monday morning was a family of three hit a deer, which was much smaller. At 45 miles an hour, it went through the
Through
front
the
windshield
windshield.
and out
Yep.
the back.
Yep.
I stopped the car naturally, and my son went back to check on the deer. He said the deer got up and pranced off like it was proud. Now,
For the moment, yeah.
the interesting thing was I was going to release, when I got back home, it was my plan, and I discussed it the night before. It was my plan to release the information that I had found on the blood moons and a prophecy within Ezekiel, which brought us to that point. Actually, it brings us to the point of 3:13:13, which I never talked about. 3:13:13 was the day that the world got its first Jesuit pope ever.
All right.
An illegal Jesuit pope, a violation of Catholic law. I didn't make the rules, they made the rules, and they violated the rules by installing a Jesuit as pope. So that was the 3:13 prophecy. So it's just odd that all happened, but I was never supposed to release that information.
Right.
That deer should have killed us. It should have killed both my son and myself. And here, out of nowhere, this blue orb saved us. I named it George from the book or from the novel of Mice and Men. I'll follow him anywhere.
Right.
So, when you see that type of thing, when your life involves things of a nature that you cannot explain scientifically, other than this was a blue energy orb and it absorbed the shock and it prevented us from being dead. I had no doubt. I know exactly how fast I was going. I just set the cruise control.
Right.
So when you live through these many things, you start to get a real good understanding of what we're dealing with. And if we were so weak and puny, I could have never made it to this point. And you see, I've had a lot of practice not dying. Some people go through a couple events. I've had a lot of practice not dying. So whatever is thrown at me, I know I'm good to go. I'd rather not go through the pain. A few times I have been busted up pretty good. I've needed more surgery than what I would like to talk about. But I've lived through all the events. And it's not like I'm a crippled up old man. I've just pulled off one of the most fantastic adventures in my life, and we're going back for more in the spring as soon as we can get back up there. We're doing concrete work, and the temperature's just too cold for us to continue. So we'll regroup and we'll reattack. We'll go off the grid again come the spring. But now's the time that we all have to come to this comprehension of who we really are. We are the ones who will go through this paradigm change that we're facing, and we are the ones that will repopulate not just this planet, but the purpose is for humans to populate every planet within the galaxy and every galaxy within the universe. Now, that may sound like science fiction to some, but it's already been set up. Arthur C. Clarke gave us a little bit of insight with the movies 2001 and 2010, when David Bowman turns into the Star Child. He's the overseer of the future of the humans. That's already been set up. See, when Christ talked about his government not being part of, or his kingdom not being part of this world, that kingdom is a government. It's a cosmic government which is already in rule. And so this is not going to be a religious awakening. A spiritual awakening, yes. But you can't pick the right religion. There is no right religion because it's personal. When we follow the greatest commandment where it says you must love Yahweh your God with your whole heart, soul, and mind, that's a relationship. It's a relationship with the most powerful force within the cosmos itself. And we have the ability to draw energy and power from that entity. If we are the children, if we are created in the Father's image at that soul level, guess what? The physical vessel doesn't matter as much as the consciousness which is in the vessel. It's our own consciousness and life force which will get us through every situation, provided we plug that life force back into source, back into the dynamic energy which controls everything, not only in our three-dimensional world, but everything across all the dimensions. It's the God particle that we activate. And on a conscious level, or say what is commonly called subconscious, we can tap right into that and draw strength that is first on a spiritual level, but we can turn that spiritual strength into physical strength, whether through an instant burst of strength, which has allowed some people to do magnificent things in times of emergency, or whether through a physical strength which needs endurance. So we can tap into that strength. We have that ability. And Jesus himself said that we would one day be doing greater things than he did. See, if we could command the seas to be calm, if we could turn water into wine, if we could feed thousands with leftovers, essentially, then we can manipulate matter itself. But we can't do it.
That's positive domination. Go ahead, Papa.
Yeah, but that comes down to frequencies and actually transmitting those frequencies.
Yeah, you see, we don't have the ability yet for two reasons. Number one, if we did, we would misuse it.
Right.
But the main reason that we don't have it is that our DNA is damaged, and we do not have a two-way direct communication with the Creator. It tends to be one way. We don't have his, quote, Holy Spirit upon us. When we get to Revelation 21, you see, everybody gets to Armageddon and the world ends. No. All the nonsense in this world ends. So you get to Revelation 21, and it starts talking about what happens with us who survived the paradigm change. It says the tent of God will be with mankind. Not that we're going there. He's coming here.
Right.
Well, Peter, I can't see a decent individual misusing that, you know?
Yeah.
So
well,
this is where it comes down to the new heaven and new earth, right? It's a matter of perception.
It's not just a matter of perception, but it's a matter of what will actually be. Once things go into that harmony, once we hit that harmony. Right now we've got nothing but disharmony on this planet.
You're telling me.
But once we hit a harmony, think about all of us working together for the same goal.
Right.
Without fighting, without the wars, without, oh, well, he's black, or he's white, he's yellow, he's red. Yeah.
Who cares?
Who cares?
Well, here's the thing.
You know, control over that?
For I hear you, Papa. For a decent individual to, I'm gonna say, have a so-called trump card. You know, if you're a decent guy, why would you misuse that? You should, in your right mind, you know, have the ability not to misuse that, for God's sakes.
Sure. But you see, ultimate power ultimately corrupts. And so the last thing you want to do is give a bunch of humans ultimate power. At least.
Well, it depends on who you're dealing with. Yeah.
See, here's the thing that has to disappear. Remember I said we were being beta tested?
Yeah.
Once the beta test is over, guess what? We won't be in beta anymore. We won't have a reason to fight.
When is that time going to come?
You see, that's the
Yeah,
paradigm change.
Really soon.
Yeah, really soon. We're
Really
facing it.
soon.
When's it going to come? By my best calculation, we have started the final 3.5 year counting.
By the end of the year.
And I can't tell you exactly when, because as Jesus himself said in Matthew 24:22,
He's not going to tell you.
well, he said those days would be cut short. He said,
Right.
on account of the chosen ones, those days would be cut short, because if they weren't cut short, no flesh would be saved.
Right.
So, who are the chosen ones? You see,
Right.
they're not some elite group. We are the chosen ones if we choose.
Right.
We all have free will. Nobody's going to force us to turn around and get our house in order and say, okay, well, we got to be God's children. That's our choice. Nobody's going to force us to, pick up a Bible and say, maybe I ought to read this and forget about religion. Nobody's going to say, you need to pray. You see,
Yeah.
that's all personal choice. Nobody's going to teach us how to meditate and focus on the things that we want and then turn the fantasy into reality. And even if they tried to make us do that, we'd still do it our way, because it's our choice.
Right.
But if we're not given the skills or the technology to do that, then we don't have a choice. You see, we
Right.
see these kids crying because they didn't get their way in protest. They don't like the current president. Well, guess what? You got another 4 years to change that according to the law, but right now you're stuck with it.
Yeah.
But if you had the empowerment, then it wouldn't matter to you, because you would realize that there are much greater things than just who's president of the United States. We're facing a major change, and
Yeah.
that change is going to cost the lives of the ignorant.
Right.
It's just that simple.
Now, I think there's a certain kind of people that would actually survive this. You know what I mean? And those
Yeah.
are the peoples who are capable of sympathizing or empathizing.
Well,
You know.
it goes back to the greatest commandment, Barry. Love God and love your neighbor. It's
Right,
just that
right.
simple. See, because
Exactly.
love takes us out of that beta. It brings
Right.
us into alpha.
Right.
So, you see some poor folks walking up the street and they don't have anything to eat, and you start throwing stones at them. That's beta.
Yeah.
You bring them into your home and you give them a meal.
Yeah.
That's alpha.
Right.
Well, what concerns me is at what point can we successfully, throughout our legitimate thinking, override all that beta crap,
Well, as long as we keep ourselves, here's where mental exercise comes in. The first thing that you want to do is stay relaxed as possible. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go out and do physical hard work, but you want to keep your mind relaxed, not in that I'm ready to fight somebody, I'm ready to take somebody on. Yeah, just irritate me and I'll put you right in your place. You see, that type of attitude is a beta attitude.
Yeah.
If we're looking to help others, if we're looking to be a positive influence, it all comes back to that automatically takes us out of that beta. Remember, if you're going to fight or you're going to run from a fight, that's beta. It's a reactionary state where we have very little time to think about anything. Alpha is where we contemplate life. It's where we contemplate our future. We daydream in alpha. We make love in alpha.
I don't know how, Peter, I don't know how many times throughout the years, going back many years ago, well, it's just back like 98 through 2006, when I was a union steward on a job, and we'd have issues, and I could, what's interesting is I could wave a magic wand, man, and just schmooze it over,
Yeah, that's part of being able to stay in that alpha state. I had a very interesting experience one time in my sales career. I walked into a client's office and he was having an issue. He was just on I had not met him before. He was just on a list of people I needed to contact. Well, you thought that I turned around and I was the
Consolidation,
worst person on the
consolidation, man.
face of the planet. That this guy started yelling and he read my card. He looked at my card. He said, "You're Peter Kling." I said, "Yes." He started yelling and screaming at me. I had no clue what was going
One,
on here.
one ear and out the other side, and you
Well,
consolidate.
here's the interesting thing. I turned around and I yelled and screamed right back at him. I said, and I didn't insult him or anything. I used the same tone and pitch. I said, "I didn't cause your problem," and so forth and so on. I said, "But I got into. I didn't cause your problem. I don't even know what your problem is, but I'm here to help you solve the issue. Now, if you explain it to me, we can go and look at exactly what we're dealing with."
Right.
And I brought the tone right down.
Yeah.
Took right out of that beta. I was
You're
going to fight
knocking
with him.
you're knocking them down, man.
Yeah, I brought him right
Yeah.
down into alpha, and so now I'm there to help him, and he understands that.
Right.
20 minutes later, he shook my hand and he said, "If there's anything I can do for you, let me know." Right now, he apologized. He was grateful.
Well, yeah. Well, Peter, what happens is that they're unglued, they're out of their element, and you consolidate the issue and bring it right down to a relaxing mode and say, "Hey, look, come on, man. You know, good heavens, reevaluate where you're coming from, and let's just make things happen in a positive fashion." Is what it comes down to.
Yeah, and the ability to do that, to defuse a situation, it takes a little skill. Our first response would be to get right back in his face, and before you know it, you got fisticuffs going on. But when we can draw down the tension and bring it into a state of alpha, now you can work on a solution. Before there was no working on a solution. Guess what? Now that we're out of that beta mode, we can now work on a solution. You see, once we start working together and have that harmony, and that's really what it's going to take to get through this paradigm change. And exactly how it's going to come, I'm not sure. We've got Planet X, or the Nibiru event, as I call it.
Yeah.
All it has to do is be one good solar storm to knock out the electric grid. And according to a government study, and some people believe it's less, but according to a government study, in 2 years, 90% of the population of the United States would be dead. Now, do you think the people that would join together in alpha would be the survivors or the ones that die?
Probably survivors.
Those who can work together and do so in alpha.
Yeah.
Because guess what? When they're in alpha, they're in a state of love.
Right.
They can draw on that cosmic energy. They can connect. We can connect directly with God, with the Father, with Yahweh, with the Creator, and draw that power and that energy.
Right.
And that is what is going to get us through this. It's working together in unison and harmony, because there's going to be a world governmental change. The evil alien forces which have been controlling this planet for the last 6,000 years are going to be out of here.
They're going away.
Gone.
Yep, they're going away.
Yeah.
Yep. Peter,
So,
we got about 4 minutes here, or 2 minutes actually. Go ahead and wrap this up.
Well, folks, if you've enjoyed the program, go read Letters to Earth. You can, The Future is Yours is the name of it. A lot of this is explained to it. I'm working on a second book. I hope to get it out with it before too long. And when I say that, before I go back off grid, so I've got about 4 months to get it finished.
Right.
And that will kind of pick up and take us to the second place. I'll explain a lot more in there about things that we talked tonight, our interaction with alien beings, where they came from, how they're influencing us, and where our own power comes from. If we weren't so powerful, they wouldn't care.
Right.
But they try to harness our power or make us give our power up, one or the other.
Website
So
information? You got a
yeah,
website?
the website is www.peterkling.com. And if you want to reach me, reach out on Facebook. Send me a Facebook request, a friend request, or right now I've got an issue with my email. But if you want to email me, you can email me at peterkling777 at hotmail.com, and I'll be more than glad to answer any questions for you.
That's Kling
But
with a K, right?
Kling with a K, yes.
Yep.
But letters to Earth, the future is yours, and it really is it's our future. We have free will. We can make it whatever we want. So that's probably a good place to leave it for now. There's so much more to discuss.
Well,
Uh,
it'll have to wait
and,
for another show. We've our 3 hour timer has run out.
absolutely. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much, Barry and Sketch, and folks, love and blessings to all. Stay in alpha.
Thanks, Peter.
Very good, Peter, and fantastic having you on the show, man. And we will indeed go through this one more time down the line and have you on once again. But otherwise, back to you, Papa, man.
All right, man. All right, this has been Show Us Don't Tell Us on the L&M Radio Network. Thanks for listening. Have a great evening.